smile and be excited, and that way you'll be ready. We're live. So, this is our recurring weekly theme is I'm never exactly sure at what point between when I tell OBS to make us go live and when I tell YouTube to go make us go live, there's like, the communication's not great. Anyway, point is we're here now. Welcome to our second to last
Oh
WandaVision live show.
no.
I know. Or as we have preemptively dubbed it, Sad Girl Hour. I mean, it's always Sad Girl Hour, but
Extra sad.
extra sad girl. We like we're talking about this earlier today, and we're like, oh, this is going to be Sad Girl Hour tonight, like meaning us ourselves. But Candace on Twitter was like, yeah, because you're talking about it's Sad Girl Hour because you're talking about verified sad girl Wanda, and I was like, oh, that's better than our thought. So
Our thing is usually just when we've gotten together in this way during the pandemic, it devolves into Sad Girl Hour.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. History shows. Anyway, we're here today to talk about episode 8, previously on.
Yes, and this is me for a summary of this episode. Okay, so here we go. We start in Salem in 1693, which this is, I believe, the time of the Salem witch trials. So as we see Agatha being led into the woods towards a pyre by cloaked figures, like I immediately assumed, burning at the stake. So I was like, oh no, witch trials. And Agatha is tied to the stake, but using magic. And as the figures pull back their cloaks, we see that they're all women. So Agatha is being held by trial by her coven for, they say, stealing knowledge above her age and station and practicing dark magic. At first, Agatha plays innocent, but the coven lady in charge tells her to stop with the deception. So Agatha's new defense is that she didn't break the rules because it isn't her fault. She's so powerful. Surprising no one, that doesn't actually work. So at that, the coven begins like an incantation to essentially kill her. Agatha cries out to the coven lady in charge, and she calls her mother, which I don't know if this is like a respectful mother of the coven or if this is like mommy, actual mother.
I got the latter vibes, but that is a valid question. I just assumed it was the latter, but I guess the former could also be true.
Okay, I don't know. So the witches try and kill Agatha, but we see that their blue magic is absorbed into her body and it turns purple. I like our lighting here. And the magic reverses essentially and ends up killing all of the witches of the coven. So Mother Coven lady in charge realizes what's happening and she tries to kill Agatha herself, but also gets drained of life. So Agatha sets herself free and takes Mother's brooch on the way out. Just for good measure, she steals that, which we've seen Agatha wearing as well. In the present, Agatha and Wanda are still in the basement of Don't Go In There. Wanda tries to use her magic on Agatha, demanding to know where her children are, but her magic isn't working here. So Agatha exposits to us, which I'm expositing to you because I think it might be important, that there are some basic protection spells on each wall, and the magic rules are that in any given space, only the witch that casts the runes can use her magic. So Wanda's magic doesn't work here, Agatha's does. Agatha does a little bit of villain gloating of sorts at this point, and she takes credit for bringing fake Pietro, or Fietro as she calls him. It's such a SnarkSquad nickname that I...
One of us.
I was like, great, that's amazing. So she brought Pietro here to take advantage of Wanda's grief, basically. Agatha was attracted to Westview in the first place because she sensed all of Wanda's magic, and she wants to know how Wanda is doing this. She gives a little bit of a demonstration of the kind of magic that she can do, some mind control, some simple transmutation, but nothing on the scale of what Wanda is doing. She calls it like magic on autopilot. in kind of a mirror to the beginning of the episode. Wanda insists that she isn't doing anything. She's like, I'm not doing it. But Agatha whacks her against the walls, basically, because she's done being gentle and trying to wake Wanda up from her fantasy. She just kind of wants to speed this along here.
Let's
and
go.
so it's time to, yeah, it's like none of this. So it's time to take an actual trip through Wanda's grief and memories for Agatha's viewing pleasure. So the first memory is in Wanda's childhood home, where we learned that her father sold videotapes of sitcoms, making sitcoms a huge part of her growing up experience and how she learned English. And on this particular night, it's baby Wanda's turn to pick. So she picks an episode of Dick Van Dyke, and they're all watching together as an adorable family when an explosion destroys their home and kills Wanda's parents. The Wanda and Pietro are like hiding in the rubble under a table, and a missile lands right in front of them, a Stark Industries missile. But baby Wanda uses her magic to keep it from detonating, even though at that point she doesn't know that that's what she's doing. And like, even in the present, she's like reluctant. She's like, no, it was just effective. Like, she's still kind of reluctant to accept what she actually did. Next, we go to a Hydra facility where Wanda and Pietro were being experimented on, and they used the Mind Stone on Wanda, which is in Loki's staff, and this is how her powers were amplified. Next, we go to the Avengers compound after Pietro's death, and in this memory, Vision comes to her and tries to comfort her after her loss, and he delivers this very big thesis statement of, "But what is grief if not love persevering?" Sad girl hours. Yes. And then the final memory is Wanda going to the sword facility because she knows that they have Vision's body and she wants to bury him. Hayward lets Wanda in so she's able to see that they are taking apart Vision's body, and Hayward refuses to let her have his weapon, basically. So Wanda breaks into the operation room of sorts, and sensing no life in Vision's body, leaves without him, making our zombie road trip theory actually false.
Pour one out for zombie road trip. Alas.
It was beautiful while it lasted. Before his death, Vision left Wanda a deed to a house he bought them in Westview, New Jersey. So she drives there and sees the empty like plot of land, and in her grief, her magic kind of erupts, and she creates the house that we know. She creates the hex that we know, but it also creates an all magic version of Vision, which is what we've been seeing. So this, as Agatha is watching all of this because she's been going with Wanda through all this, she comes to the conclusion that Wanda is using chaos magic and is thus the Scarlet Witch. Episode ends, and then in the post-credit scene, Hayward has finally managed to bring Vision back, but it's not Vision. It's like a non-Vision Vision. It's like an all-white Vision. So yeah, that's the end.
That's the end.
Oh my god, so many comments while I couldn't look and read my notes at the same time.
a lot of love for the lights, specifically. So I thought that you had been seeing the chat because you called it out,
No.
but
I had not. I said purple, and I was like, "Oh my god, we both have purple," which we didn't necessarily do on purpose, but it fits.
We just changed to match. That was
Yes.
the coordinating that we did, and we got lucky that we happened to choose the right one. Yeah. So I guess we start where we always start. Did you like it?
Yes, I did. It is one of those things that I can very clearly see why other people might not like it. This was obviously one of those episodes that was more into confirming things we already knew versus like showing us new things. And it was a literal trip through memories. So in that way, it wasn't very plot heavy. So I see why other people don't like it. But again, it's a big, huge exploration of grief. And it was like a culmination of like what we've been saying, like Wanda cannot face her grief, and she finally had to. And I think this needed to happen in the story through the arc. So yes, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I also very much enjoyed it. And it needed to happen through the arc, and like the fact that it happened, it was like magic therapy. I felt like that felt right. That felt like the correct way for this to ultimately play out. I, I'm a sucker for a grief story, and I
Yes.
also like I think the ways in which this maybe felt too expository and like information heavy for a lot of people, that also kind of feel ties back into the ways in which uh like I have enjoyed the parts of this show that have been slower. Like that has never been a problem for me. So yeah, all around, I very much loved this. It was very emotional. I like woke up and like went directly to start watching this. So what a way to start my day,
Same.
with tears.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been loving this all along, obviously. We talk about this every week. But, I've been usually watching either like on lunch break or after I finished my work day. But this morning I woke up and I went, Wanda. And I literally like watched it in bed because I was so excited to get to this episode. So yeah, it was a good cry way to start this episode. I mean, start this day.
Yeah, yes. So this wasn't where we were gonna start, but it's already like thing being discussed in the chat. So like let's I guess jump to the end then with the
Okay.
white vision and like where that is going. So
Yep.
there's so Nick says, I think it's good to note that Hayward is tracking Vision in the hex. My guess is to put his consciousness back in the body. And then a couple people disagreeing with it. That was the most unethical therapy session ever, but I loved it. Yeah, I agree with Miriam. I don't think Hayward is trying to be good and helpful, bringing Vision actually back to life. He just wants a supercomputer that kills. Yeah, that is my sense. I actually still don't understand what exactly they used as like the thing from the source. Was that like a piece of his like that ripped off of him when he was trying to leave?
It was something glowing in red, which indicated hex magic to me, but
Yes.
like some part of the hex had come out, but I couldn't tell
Yes.
what exactly, if it was a part
Yes.
of Vision. There have been a number of things that kind of got ejected from the hex through, as we watched the
That's
episode.
true.
So
That's true.
it looked,
Interesting.
oh, Nick was saying drone. I was going to say it looked missile to
Oh,
me, but
yeah, yeah,
drone
yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yep, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the
So
drone that she threw back.
the whole thing with Hayward is so in the zombie vision thing, it made me laugh so freaking much because I like we predicted zombie vision because partly because we had the sense that like his body was there, but also at some point we heard Hayward himself say Wanda stole Vision's body.
Yes.
And like so that was like the confirmation of like, oh, okay, this theory was correct. So once we see her go and all she wants is to bury his body and then she just leaves his body because she realizes that, there's no spark of him left there. It I know it was like our theory coming to like a crash, and it was also really satisfying because it gives you a sense of like where she was at that moment to where we see her now in the hex and the way that her grief has kind of like grown and grown. And she didn't go there with the intention of like stealing his body and causing all of this like misery and trouble and whatnot. And then also there was this moment of like, okay, yeah, they didn't actually go with the zombie Vision body across state lines. I understand why not. But fair.
It also, I think, made the Hayward stuff a little bit better. Like that's still for me the like Hayward being just sort of like a big evil whatever. It is still kind of the like the least interesting part of the season. However, I do think that it made that a little bit more satisfying as well, because one of the things, like when he showed that clip, I had this feeling of like, why are you just now if she came and stole his body, like why the fuck are you just now showing everybody this? Like this seems like a weird choice. And like it now has this context, like she didn't steal his fucking body, this was like bullshit, but it was a way of like, because of the sitcom angle, it was clear that much of the team was very pro Wanda and was like, it
Mhm.
wasn't just the trio that he ejected that felt that way, I would imagine. And so it was like a way of pulling sympathy away from Wanda, to lie, to flat out lie in this way, but to take
Yes.
this clip that he had, and so yeah, so like we believe that she took the body because the show literally told us that she took the body,
Mhm, mhm.
but it also makes sense that it was Hayward specifically who told us, and like, yes, of course he lied, so yeah.
I in this place, episode 8 now, where we are, where I like my brain still wants to do like theory things, and I'm like, slow down, buddy. We only have one episode left. There's not many other places where we can go. But in watching the scene where Hayward lets her in and like shows her the dismantled body, it also felt very manipulative. And I don't know to what end, but even letting her go down there, and I did not that he couldn't necessarily stop her, but it all felt like too easy for him to be like, come on back.
Yeah.
Look at your boy toy in pieces. And I don't know if it was with the hope that she could revive him, like he was hoping that was what would happen, or what else he could possibly be triggering, but it felt a little too easy, if you ask me.
Yeah, yes. He still feels like a blunt force instrument in a way that nobody else on this show does, which, given the rest of the show, means that I cannot, until we get to the end of the last episode and it's confirmed that he just is what he just is, that instrument. I now continue to believe that like there's that is also a place where there's information that we don't have, that like there is something else going on there, that like maybe I don't know, maybe Hayward is secretly Mephisto or whatever. Like I don't know what the thing is, but that there is potentially just something else going on there. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. But
Yeah. The other thing, I guess, is that so he knows that Wanda leaves the hex or leaves the sword facility without Vision.
mm-hmm.
Next thing we know, he has sent, as far as we know, Monica and Jimmy to go investigate a missing persons thing. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know what's happening yet at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they discover the hex.
Mm-hmm.
So does he know all along that the hex is happening and Wanda's there and Vision is too, because he's tracking Vision? So at like what point does he have the information and start to put these things in place versus when we get the information?
My guess is post like Darcy making the TV connection, I think like set things in place. Like once Darcy got them away to pick up the broadcast, that like put things in motion. And then like once he was like, oh, like Vision's fucking in there, and that like sort of reverse course. And so then suddenly it was like, okay, all these people I brought in, you gotta go. You gotta go. You're not. You're no longer. You're no longer serving my purpose. Like I
Yeah,
needed you here because I was confused. But now that I understand
I
what's going,
know.
now that I know what's what, we're done here. And so yeah, I think like yes, I think that he knew that. My guess is the one and only thing that he knew or believed with was fairly confident about was that the hex was Wanda, that like that Wanda
Yeah.
had done whatever this weird anomaly was, it was her, and like that is information that he withheld from people, that like that was a need to know piece of information until Darcy made the TV thing happen. But then like from there, I think that is how he started putting the pieces together. That's my guess. That's my take on it.
Yeah. That's like big, terrible manager energy. I was confused, but now that you've explained it to me, get out and I will take the credit. Goodbye.
You can go now. Yup.
All right, that's all I have to say about
Yes.
stupid Hayward.
Nick says, I don't think that they're going for Mephisto anymore, which is fine, but that was my original hope. Yeah, I mean, my only knowledge of Mephisto is just that like it's like mostly it's from the chat. It's what you guys have said to tell me that that's the theory. Miriam says, I am kind of thinking that he maybe knows something or is maybe related to the big bad, because I don't think Wanda knows her power, but he thought he could revive Vision. Yes. Yeah, Miriam, that is my sort of like I don't know, the thing that I am like feeling until the show proves it false is basically that.
And I
Um,
think to the point of like if it's Mephisto or someone else. So I've been seeing a lot of people talk about how, the whole thing has always been that the TV show will feed into the like, movies that are coming out. But also probably this has to be self-contained in a way that people who didn't watch this will be able to watch the movies.
mhm.
So I can see why they wouldn't give us a big bad that will go throughout the series, but more like maybe tease a big bad at the end of this, or just like show us our first look at whatever the big bad is, either in the whatever that guy's name is, Magic Tony Stark, or in the Spider-Man, other new Spider-Man movie. So like one of those is gonna have a big bad that was teased here, but we couldn't spend too much time with it because some people are not watching the TV series.
Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness
Thank
uh,
you. Thank you.
is Tony Stark with magic, but yes. Look at the name. I did it. But yes, yeah, I agree. Like that's the kind of thing that like maybe it'll be teased with like you get like a post-credit scene of whoever, of somebody, Hayward or whatever, somebody from this, and like their eyes glow or something, and like that's it's like that kind of thing, not like this will be resolved, but then maybe some sort of tease of what's coming next.
Yeah.
Big agree that Elizabeth Olsen's acting in this episode is incredible. I mean, she's been all around incredible, but like yes, she made me feel all the sad feelings, every one of those.
Mhm.
I guess there's a whole range of other emotions that I didn't feel while watching this episode, but yeah, the accent thing. Agatha's comment about the accent really coming and going. I love all of the little meta jokes.
Yes.
They're great. They're always great. Which I guess is as good a transition as I'm gonna get back to the thing that we were gonna start with, which is a sitcom. So in the previous discussions, our first thing has been like talking about how the sitcom angle of the episode worked or didn't work, and obviously there was no explicit sitcom angle here. The idea of like a tour through your memories is absolutely a like major TV trope. So there's that, and we also do get this like really big bit of background for why the sitcom thing has been happening in the first place. Like we get a like an answer to that as well, which like I think they had been throwing so many other things at us that I honestly had kind of forgotten that that was a question that I had. Like why TV shows, other than just like to me I was satisfied with sort of like from the jump there is something extremely meta about this idea that we have our character who says, I have been written into tragedies and I'm fucking sick of it. So I am like, and like on that level, like it worked for me just on that level, which that is still part of what the show is doing, or yeah, what the show is doing. But the introduction of this like a really like clear and simple answer to the question of why sitcoms, um
Yeah.
uh, mm,
And
it
it's just,
goes.
and the answer is like, I can see it being kind of like eye rolly for certain people, but there are same people watching this TV show. So the answer of why sitcoms and just generally being like because they were important, like she watched them. We see her watching a series of sitcoms throughout, just like we have talked about the series of sitcoms that we've watched growing up, and like
Right.
how you can tie specific sitcoms to specific times and specific memories, and like losing yourself in TV and media, especially during these times where she had a lot of grief. So it was like a super simple answer, but also like, duh, like,
Yeah. Yes.
like
Yes.
this is, something that is it's tied to her childhood, tied to her last memory of her mom and her dad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I just, all of the feelings. And part of the reason that I've loved it is because I love TV and I love the way that this is like, paying homage to TV. So having that there as well was just like
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. The idea of little Wanda watching old shows with her parents hits me in the feels because that's how I discovered my love of classic TV too. Yeah, like I mean, I mentioned this on one of the whatever some stream that like the when we got to the 90s sort of stretch of things, that my experience with that is that like I remember in like I don't know, very TV family fashion, like my whole family sitting down in front of the TV with TV dinners watching the TGIF like lineup of sitcoms or whatever. So yes, yes.
There's also the piece of it though that her family was using sitcoms to like learn English, and as you know, coming from first generation American, so my parents were immigrants, and watching sitcoms was the way that my dad like improved his English. So we talked about like watching Nick at Night, and that's with my dad. Like we would sit down and watch Nick at Night because he loves sitcoms because that's how he learned English. So he was the one who pulled us into that as well. So seeing the same thing, like literally, when I tell you, watching this morning was cry o'clock for me. I was like, oh no, I could not.
Okay,
So,
okay.
and I think that watching English TV is just like huge for a lot of people, a lot of immigrants in terms of like learning English or whatnot. So that was a really cool detail as well. And yes, tears.
Yep. And endless tears. Okay, well then, Agatha. It's been Agatha all along. So it's
It's been
Agatha o'clock.
Agatha. Yes. If we give props to Elizabeth Olsen for her acting, I also think that Catherine Hahn killed it in this episode. And there were times, I mean, she was hamming it up, but it felt very purposeful. I loved all of her like movements and the way that she did her magic in a very physical way. And there were moments where she like turned on a dime, and her facial expressions, like especially at the beginning, where she's like, please don't. And they're like, enough. And she's like, I'm too powerful. Like the facial expression changed so instantly that I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. So I think she killed it as well.
Yes, I have her performances have been, you know, consistently fantastic throughout the season as well. It's like I think one of the her performances have been probably the most consistently talked about, which is sort of unsurprising because she'd be like, we know to talk about Wanda, like the discussions are inherently about Wanda, and so then, you know, when you have a standout second like supporting character in that way, you're like, oh well, that's, you know, we must acknowledge the strength of this supporting character. But anyway, I yes, her ability to make jokes and work in such serious high stakes, like yes, that balance, so many things about this character feel like just really, really so well suited to Catherine Hahn's strengths too. Like this was a really like genius casting. Like the Catherine Hahn deserves credit, but I also the casting director, whoever made that call, deserves credit as well for recognizing that's who this role belonged to. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this additional bit of her backstory. I am bummed to feel like Agatha and Wanda BFF, like that story is that possibility is getting. I was really, really hoping that this was gonna be that there was gonna be some like, actually it's not what you thought, like whatever you thought that it's been Agatha all along, like it actually no, and she's, I don't know, I'm here to be an ally in some type of way. Wasn't quite that, but I really enjoyed her power, and I think that there is still hope because of the way that this ended on the note of like, I know who you are. That has the potential to, you know, for that to go somewhere. The reason that I was, as I mentioned last week, that like the reason that I was holding out hope for, you know, them to be pals is basically that like the one series of comics that I read, they like, Agatha's dead and she's like Wanda's ghost best friend, and so she's like teases her but is also kind of like a motherly sort of figure. And so if she's like, oh, I know who you are, I could see them heading that direction of like a mentor, you know, mentoring type deal. So that's another one that my heart is gonna hold out for until the show tells me definitively not. Yeah.
Yes. And to your point of the casting, it is, you know, the difficulty there is getting somebody that you could like look at this performance and go, she could murder me, which she could, but also want to grab a beer, which I wouldn't be opposed to because it would be fun and funny. And she balances both.
You know?
You might murder me during beer, but
I would have a great time up until I got murdered. So whatever.
Yes. She nails both of those aspects. And the reason that I still, not necessarily for whatever arc we're getting here, but I still hold out hope for the character is not only how it ended, but how it began. Because even though I feel like she was putting on like, oh, I didn't know, like that kind of thing, I just think that there was some sincerity to like, you could teach me, like I can be good. That sort of like sentiment of like
Yes.
I am, and her magic kind of being out of control. And I think that we
Yeah.
see that in a mirror to Wanda. Wanda's magic is also out of control. And she makes a point to bring out to Wanda that she doesn't even know the basics. She doesn't know the fundamentals. So I think that the show is very clearly mirroring these two characters in terms of what control they have over their magic. So I
Mm-hmm.
could see her still having hope of being good, especially because from what I understand, like you're saying of the comments, she does go back and forth between good and bad throughout. So it's it's there. The
Right.
potential is
It's there.
there.
It's there. Yes, still clinging to my hope for Agatha as the mentor to the Scarlet Witch, which I guess is where we go now. The Scarlet Witch. We finally they were sort of teasing that earlier that like she's never, I guess she's never explicitly been called that in the
No,
MCU, which is like a thing that
no.
hadn't I had not clocked until like that conversation however many episodes ago where Hayward is like no cute nicknames or whatever. um which the way that he was asking that question actually also makes me feel in my like tinfoil hat brain from watching this show like that also lends credence to the idea that Hayward is not exactly what he seems, that
Right.
he's something else too, that like maybe he was fishing for that name. He could still just be, but his motivations do make sense to me on their face. Evil military man, he wants his sentient weapon. Like, fine. Boring, but fine. um, uh, I hijinks of teaching more structured magic. Sorry, I'm like the chat I think is like 2-3 minutes behind us. Um,
Yes.
so we're like moving on, and they're responding to the Agatha stuff. I think the crown thing was something different, but I also want that unaddressed. They couldn't call her Scarlet Witch because they introduced. Oh, interesting. Because of the X-Men stuff.
So
Yeah. Yes. That
and
makes sense.
now we're getting to this point where she's obviously using magic, but when they introduced her, it wasn't necessarily like we didn't get that like element of magic. It was more, I think they were leaning into that like she was being experimented on. And so that was kind of the source of her magic. But now that they're leaning fully into magic as
Mm-hmm.
like part of her thing, yeah, the moment where we hear her called the Scarlet Witch was obviously like a thing we were building towards. Yep. and
Yes.
and especially because we saw her in costume first and all of that. And I see people in the chat are mentioning that back in the beginning when Agatha is killing either her mom or her mother, whatever, and then she's using her magic, like we see a crown like on her head of magic, but it's very much in the shape almost of the Scarlet Witch that has like the two horns. So we like is it, was she a Scarlet Witch? I don't know. Her magic wasn't red, or was it some other like magicy thing where that thing is significant?
I yes. I yeah. The potential, many potentials and theories, like in terms of what that could be. I again, to bring up my one and only touchstone and reference of like place source for theories, in those comics she discovers that the people that she believed were her parents are actually her aunt and uncle, and her mom left her with them, like basically to hide her because her mom was the Scarlet Witch, and that like the Scarlet Witch was like an inherited title, like it was like inherited magic basically. And so my first thought, just like having that like fresh in my brain when I saw that vision of her, in like from Agatha's perspective or whatever, was that we were looking at her mom, uh,
Mm.
based on no clues from the show. It's like, to be clear, like this is just solely like that's the story that I had most recently in my head. So I was like, oh, is that her mom? Are we going with that route? I don't think, like, I think this is their primary source material for this is actually a different set of comics entirely. So like I don't really think that is it. Like I think that it's mostly like it's a it's foreshadowing, I guess like that's what Wanda is going to become. But yeah, I don't know. I have
Yeah.
no, that's the extent of my
Foreshadowing,
theories.
or like I don't know, they're literally like going back into memories. So at this point she could have been seeing something in the future, which I don't know if that is something that is part of her power, but you should, that being her, like a future version of her, is in the realm of possibility to me.
Yes, yes. A lot of people saying in the chat that like Wanda never realized really like processed that what she was doing was magic until Agatha tells her, which like yes, and especially if like her exposure is to like super powered people in like her brother is like has his powers and whatever, and like the way in which she is sort of thrust into that world, there's not really any reason for her to assume that what she is doing isn't uh, like explicitly aligned with that. And like so I can see how this is, it makes sense to me that this is the first moment that Wanda's like, oh okay, like magic specifically, and that there is something distinct and different about magic
Right.
that's not the same as my brother is real fast, like or whatever.
Yes, and that at that point of her like being around superheroes, but also like an orphan and radicalized and experimented on. Like there was no reason for her to think, "Oh, I'm a witch." Like everything led up to her being like, "Oh, okay, I'm like the same as these people. I'm super powered."
Mhm.
And I looked this up and now I can't remember because I looked it up like in bed this morning, but they call um uh Agatha calls the magic that she uses on the missile like a probability hex or something like that. So I looked up to see like the type of magic, and it's basically that she can affect the probability of what things will happen and basically swing things in her favor. So to
Uh-huh.
her it would almost be like she's really lucky. Like she got lucky that the missile failed. Like so it
Uh-huh.
wouldn't be a thing where she would like creating magic in a way that she would be like, wow, that's magic. It would just be like, phew, the missile
Uh-huh.
failed. So like,
We didn't even
so,
know at the time that,
yeah,
yeah, uh-huh,
yeah.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh,
So I
uh-huh.
thought that that was really neat, and I agree with everybody in the chat that the way that they're not doing a full rewrite, but just adding pieces of context in a way that you're like, oh, it could have been this all along. We just didn't know. Wanda just didn't know. That
Right.
feels cool.
Yes, yes, yeah. The idea of there being this information all along, and like it wasn't withheld, it was withheld from us solely because like our character also didn't know. And like it
Correct.
doesn't yeah, there are like larger sort of, I assume, like MCU narrative reasons why they had to effectively retcon her origin story, that like that's something that they wanted to do with this show, but it doesn't feel like a retcon. Like it feels like it is, that felt organic, like that felt very genuine, that she just didn't know, and like her circumstances were such that she had no reason to know, and it wasn't until she was introduced to this other magical character who was like, oh, I know what you are, uh to trigger that. So it was incredibly smart of them to like to do that. And I am really curious about what like the directions, like the directives that they're given, the creative teams in charge of these shows. I saw an interview where I forget her name now, but she was talking about how uh basically like she got like a list of like, here are the MCU characters, like this is what you get, these are the people you can play with, but it didn't talk about like how, yeah, like what her tasks were in terms of, because I assume that had to be part of it, right? Like there had to be some level of, here's what we need you to set up, like here are the basic details, and I would love to know what those conversations look like. But I
Yes.
feel like they got to this bit of information that they needed to include in a very like natural way, that it like only in the context of this conversation, and am I like, oh yeah, like yes, sure, they needed to kind of futz with the established version of where her powers came from, I guess. And because it did not feel that way in the episode. No futzing.
Yeah.
I felt no futzing. Amazing. Miriam says my college film professor tweeted about not liking this episode, and I'm trying to decide if I need to get into a Twitter fight with him. Do it.
Okay, so this has been this has been like a thing for me too, as I'm feeling like I'm seeing I have not like I don't dive in deep into how people feel about each episode. I sometimes look up theories and MCU stuff just because I'm not well versed or whatnot. But I see a lot of like Twitter feelings. And so a lot of the ways that people have not been liking this are ways that I like deeply disagree with. But so I just have to like look away and like not say anything because I know no Twitter fights, not in 2021.
Yeah. Yes. No. Yes. You know. No Twitter fights over TV. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
I feel that.
yes.
Yes. Because
I haven't seen, sorry,
no.
I
Go
just
ahead.
haven't seen like compelling reasons for why people dislike this.
Yeah, the reasons, most of the reasons that I have seen for why people dislike this tend to be tied to wanting something from TV that I deeply do not want, like wanting a kind of storytelling that I do not want. I
Right.
like it's the obviously like a part of the appeal of us doing this thing right here is that this is like the water cooler TV of the moment. Like this is, this is the thing around there around which there is the most like cultural critical mass, right? So the like obvious elephant in the room is like Game of Thrones, and like the thing that people are looking for is like everything that I hated about the way that Game of Thrones ended. The way that that show came to rely on shock and on twists, and like abandoning character arcs to do it. Uh and like
Yeah.
and feeling as if the best payoff was the thing that surprised your audience the most. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if I just keep saying random shit, you won't expect what I'm gonna say next, because it
Right.
doesn't make any sense. And I
Right.
feel, yeah, I just, all of the ways in which this show has done things that I saw coming, it was like, yes, because they set it up. And then there was payoff, and that was cool. Like, I don't know.
And even the ways and even in the ways that it surprised me, it has surprised me in ways like the zombie vision thing where I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." Like, you didn't take me you didn't surprise me because you took me so far out of, left field that I was like, "What the heck?" You just I assumed things, I believed you, but there were other things going on, but it still ties back to what the story you've been telling me all along. And
Mm-hmm.
even in like the criticism of this specific episode of being like a little, exposition heavy and like taking us very literally through like a series of her memories or whatnot, again, I just felt like was such a big narrative payoff because they've been telling us this whole time that Wanda's problem is that she's not facing her grief. So I feel like you very much needed this episode where she literally, and then they gave us this episode. Not only is she facing her grief, but she is literally facing her grief and watching these memories. And it's so good. It's so
Yeah.
good, especially in a show that is like hinges over these TV tropes and that is very visual and that is very much about watching, these like levels of like watching other people watch people and all that. So then to get to watch her memories, I thought was really, really neat.
Yes. Miriam says the only, and I this is great. The only way I would have wanted this episode to be better is if instead of just glowy doors, the going back through her life had been more directly tied to sitcom things. That yes, that is that's a, yeah, I agree. That's clever. I had not thought or had that feeling at all while watching it, but now that you say it, I'm like, yes, okay, that is true.
Like Agatha pulls out a TV remote control and it's like beep.
To me, it's not if the idea is original or not, it's how well the writers, production cast handled the idea, and here it's being beautifully handled. Even if I'm a little tired of trauma being the key, because they handled it so well, I understood exactly why trauma was the key, as well as how Wanda dealt with trauma. Yes, yeah, like that's, yes, the idea of like character sad is not like that's not enough. Like character has trauma. Like if you're going to do a trauma story, you need to like sit with that in some way, which again is part of
Yes.
why this episode is so like that's all this episode was. This episode was like literally, okay, we're gonna like like hardcore sit with her trauma for 45 minutes. And I yes, like the show has not shied away from it. And but it has done a really good job of balancing that without ever like it has never felt like a like slog through the darkness either, in spite of being a show that is like very intentionally and deliberately about trauma and grief, and that is earnestly exploring that trauma and grief, which is just yeah, a like very like delicate balance, well executed.
Yeah. And I also, in case we've mentioned it before, Nicole mentioned it at the top of this episode, but in case you don't know this about Snark ladies, we love a good exploration of grief in media. So I love seeing how media handles it because there are so many ways that we process grief. But I think an exploration of grief is like miles away from trauma porn. And so I totally understand like why people I don't like trauma porn and why that can be like an exhausting thing. But I think that when you sit with it and you do an exploration of grief thoughtfully, it just is something that I personally really enjoy. And this has always skewed that way. And I think the reason that it's really smart, even outside of the context of other trauma stories, is because in superhero stories, we get all of this death and destruction, and we rarely have the time and space to sit with it. You just basically move on into the next thing. And sometimes there's like a mention, or, like Captain America lost his love of his life and he carries a little picture, but we never go further than that, or have the space to really dive into that except for mentions here and there. So to have this whole thing be like, hey, what about all the grief these people have experienced? And it's
Right.
like, oh, yeah, yes, that is a thing that superhero stories don't often get to do, at least not in movie versions.
Yeah, and I think at least not in movie versions, the thing I was about to say is that like I think that this story is particularly well suited to this decision to venture into the world of TV shows, because it does feel a little bit better suited to the kind of like time and space that you need to give that. I mean, like the flip side of this, the like, MCU trauma porn example is the Black Widow stuff in Ultron. Was that yeah, Ultron. The with her like, oh, I can't have kids and so I'm a monster. Like the way that was trauma porn. There was no exploration there. There was nothing. It was just I hate myself because of a bad thing, and that's it. And like that's the kind of thing that is like deeply unsatisfying. Uh, whereas like this, where you're really taking the time and space to do that and to make that the whole thing, it is just better, so much more effective.
My example would be Hawkeye in Endgame, where he just starts murdering people like a vigilante because he's sad, he lost his family, which, okay, I get it. But also, if you don't have the time and space to sit with it, you just end up with a character who's murdering people. And then you're like, what?
I'm sorry. Mm, mm.
Mhm.
And then that
Endgame.
cool is cool.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. I'm over it. I'm not over
You're
it. I'm
not,
not.
but it's
I'm
okay.
really, I'm
We'll,
really,
we'll move on.
I'm really not. Okay, I have a big question. Do we think Vision is gonna survive this whole ordeal? I really don't. I really think that Wanda's gonna have to like kill him again, or at the very least watch him die again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know I saw like comicsy stuff about how White Vision is like a thing, and so maybe they are setting that up in some sort of way. Oh Jesus Christ! If Vision is like I mean, he can't be, because that's like to Ultron, whatever. Anyway, it is hard for me to see that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. My head immediately went to Vision will have to kill Vision and Wanda will have to watch again, which I really don't like for Wanda, my girl. But I feel like also narratively, the whole thing with this is like, okay, she's finally facing her grief. And especially with what they showed us today, a big portion of this is like she didn't have anything to mourn. His body was gone. He was treated, like a robot. He got pulled apart. There were no, there was no tribute to him. It was just kind of like, okay, he died and that's it. And the only person really still thinking about him and holding that space for him is Wanda. So if at the end of this she walks away with no vision, but she created the space for herself to get a little more time with him, to mourn him, to deal with her grief, like that feels like a narrative arc that would be satisfying to the story, not to me personally because my girl Wanda, but that's kind of what I have in my head right now.
Yeah, me too. Miriam in the chat also said, and like that both Vision and her kids. I had forgotten about the kids in all of this, but I also don't see a way, especially after we saw that Vision couldn't survive outside of the hex. I find it hard to believe that the kids could either. So
I think her kids will survive. My only basis for her kids surviving is that I think that they're setting up
Oh,
Young
sure.
Avengers.
Right.
I
Yes,
don't
that
know
there's a
how they
future for
survive.
them.
I don't have a theory on how they do, but I think that they do.
Nick says, or she's gonna have to choose between Vision or her kids. Like for some reason, when she like when like she collapses the hex or whatever, like there's only she can only sustain the magic to do one of those things, or something along those lines. Yeah, that feels that yeah yes that actually that now feels like the thing that is the most likely. I love the version of this where Wanda is able to somehow put Hex Vision's soul into Sword Vision's body. It just doesn't seem like where we're going. That's just not the energy that I'm getting.
As Wanda says in this episode, it's not that kind of show.
It's not that kind of show. No.
Yeah.
Yep, sad girl hour.
Speaking of, Nick says, the moment of Wanda, I can't feel you. There's something there that I'll be thinking about for probably years. I agree. And I think also visually, I know like his body robot, right? Robot parts. But when they show him all in pieces, oh, gut wrenching, like physical reaction to seeing,
Mm-hmm.
and they even like zoom in on his wires being like pulled out. And there was something so like gory about that, even
Yes.
though intellectually I know it's wires and like metal, but the way that they shot it and framed it all, I was like, oh no, I was right there with Wanda, like seeing
A person, this person. You are briefly frozen. I hope that you will unfreeze shortly. But yes, I was also right there with Wanda. Yes, in that moment, I think tremendous. I'm just gonna keep talking, I guess, with you, Frozen. Tremendous credit to them for shooting this thing. Actually, hold on. Let me text you to make sure that you know that you're frozen. You froze. Okay. Yeah, it's like tremendous credit to them for showing you're unfrozen now. For showing that for taking what is like a robotic, yeah, like a fucking robot, but making it genuinely feel like this is a person, which
yeah.
is a sort of that's like central to much of what Vision's whole character is, like if we're asking all of like the big philosophical questions about characters, Wanda's character is kind of at its core, it's like there's like grief, like trauma and grief and like mental health stuff is an essential part of this character, but an essential part of Vision's character is like, what does it mean to be human?
Humanity. Right.
And so the fact that they were able to film the wires in a way that like genuinely felt like, yes, this is a person, this is a dismantled person that we are looking at right now. That yeah. I don't think our pals come out of this with a happy ending. Yeah, yes, that's the one. There's a half measures. There's like, this is a you take the piece of the other thing is, because this show is so much about grief, it would feel a little bit like a cheat to say that at the end you get to take it back, that like that option is out there. I mean, if that is the way that they go, I trust this show to handle it in a way that like feels earned or whatever. But I think that, yeah, the second to last episode is, no, girl, you have to sit with your grief and you have to feel those feelings. It feels like, what is kind what is the point of that story then, if not that, like, at the end of the day, like there are some things that you cannot do, like, that, like, for all of your power, there are limits. Even your, like, seemingly limitless power does have some limits.
Right.
And raising the dead is apparently, like,
Right.
that's the natural line to draw. Like, that's the thing. So yeah.
At least without heavy consequences that
Yeah.
would then point to like, okay, sure, you got this thing. However, it's in some version or some package, or there's some consequence that means, did you really get this thing? So I could see that being like a way that they go. But I think that the show has referenced enough, even through, I think Monica was who said it last week, like, I've lost the most important people to me, but I don't get to do anything about it. So it seems like the show is aware of that speaking point of like, there is no escape from grief, you know, outside of the very powerful, and even though they don't get to escape it. It's sort of where I think that they're going. So I hope that they stay in line with that. But
Yeah.
also, I don't know, I'd love Vision to be, I'm not gonna hate on
Right.
Vision and Wanda and their kids being together.
Yeah,
So
I'm not gonna hate on a happy ending for Wanda, precious Wanda, who I love so much. Yeah, it just seems like they're telling a grief story, and you don't get to unhave that grief because it's sad. Like, that's that's the whole thing. Um, yeah. The ability to move on from it instead of being trapped in it, pretty literally. Vision quote, things aren't beautiful because they last. Miriam says, massive tonal switch, but was Bettany trolling everyone, and the person he is excited to act with is himself. This is what Twitter tells me. Amazing. That feels true. That I buy that.
yes.
I absolutely buy that. I also buy that from him in particular. That feels, from like
Yes.
from the interviews that I have seen of him, that feels like something he would do. Amazing. I love it. I love that too.
Especially because we had that moment where we were like, who can it be? And he's like, it's me, bitches. Like, okay, fair.
Incredible. I always wanted to act with myself. Uh Amazing. uh okay. Well,
All right.
anything
Anything
else?
you want to add to Speculation Station for the final episode of WandaVision?
I'm gonna cry.
That's the one. That's the only one.
That's my theory. Uh,
That's the only one that's left, folks. I will 100% find a way to cry.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Nick says, I'm thinking maybe we'll get Doctor Strange assembling a team at the end. Yeah, like post credits. Doctor Strange in the cut, whatever, the credit cut scene, mid credit scene.
Yes.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Especially because they made a thing of like Agatha being like, I sensed all your magic. So like, obviously Doctor Strange, like, he's got to be
He
sensing
is
this.
also sensing the magic. I don't really know why. Like, where is he? What's he up to?
Where is he ever? Is my question.
We're not big fans. I mean, it has
He's
so much
fine.
potential. I just
Yeah.
feel that choices were made that were wrong. Like at the
Mhm.
beginning, like from go, they made some bad choices, and that's my feelings on Doctor Strange. But although I will say, so sorry, I had like an actual point. Doctor Strange not being her being like, oh, I sensed your magic, and him not. Part of that to me feels though like, it is plausible to me that Agatha is sensing it first, for reasons of, I mean, I guess proximity could be part of it, but less than that, but for reasons of like how connected, like kinds of magic, that why is he American? Thank you, Miriam. Why is he American? That was the egregious initial sin. You already fucking had Tony Stark. You picked Benedict Cumberbatch to let him be British. Let him be British. Anyway, sorry. And also don't give him that dumb facial hair. I don't care if his comics character had it. It's yet another reason that he's just fucking magic Tony Stark. Whatever. Sorry, I got distracted from my actual point. My strong feelings about Doctor Strange. My guess is that part of what is going on is that there are like different kinds of magic, and that Agatha's magic is like the closest to hers, and like we see that here, that like that there is a kinship in their magic. That was kind of the point of Agatha's whole backstory. You know, chaos, whatever. You don't even know the basics. Yada yada yada. So it would make sense to me that their magic is much more closely affiliated, and so like that would be a reason why. That's like a like very simple like narrative reason why Agatha's first on the scene. And like maybe a little bit later, as it's growing, he's like, what's that? Yeah. Anyway, Nick says he hasn't always had the facial hair in the comics. This was a choice. Terrible.
A bad one.
A bad choice. Miriam says, I do appreciate the multimedia nature of this, watching all the interviews and people trolling fans, but in delightful ways. It is the only good thing. Yes, yeah. I understand the people who feel that this show would have been better suited for like, you know, a binge experience, and I think that that will be a good experience. It's an experience I intend to have, and I think I will like it. I intend to have that experience, and I think that it will be great. But I do think that they have done a really good job of making this first outing, especially, like feel like, yeah, I get it. I get like the weekly. I know that this wasn't even supposed to be the first thing out the door, but I think that it worked out really well, that the like meta TV show about TV shows is the one that they started with, you know, in this time where we're all, now especially, where we're all like, give us the thing all at fucking once. Why are you doing this to me? This felt like a good way to do that.
Yes, and it is something that has an inherent like mystery baked into it. Like we're asking a lot of questions, where something that was like a pure drama wouldn't necessarily be causing the sorts of conversation and speculation that this is causing, because we didn't know what the heck was going on like as we got into it. So this was like perfectly built. You have the great combinations of this being from like a massive media empire, sort of a mystery thing, really like fed to us in these bite-sized pieces, really short and like, you know, short and sweet. So I think it was just like a perfect combination to have this like moment of like mostly positive chat and multimedia and everybody watching and water cooler show and all that. So
yes,
good job, whether purposeful or not. MCU nailed it.
Well done. Great work. We thank you for giving us the one good thing in this time. I've been on the side working my way through chronologically through the MCU TV stuff and stalled at Iron Fist. That's the one. Iron Fist is the only thing I have not seen. Oh no, Iron Fist and Punisher. I have seen literally all of it, all S.H.I.E.L.D., all the kids that they've done. I'm excited about the idea of like Young Avengers because the Runaways was like, it was fine, but it consistently felt like it was falling short of what it could be. Like it could be better than it was. That was the thing actually where like the finale, what ended up being the last episode, was this moment where I was like, oh, I think like maybe you're finding your stride, but it took you too long, so you're done. You've been canceled. So all right, sure. But I'm excited about like watching that sort of, you know, try again. But yeah, Iron Fist was the one thing that I was like, I'm not interested. uh
We'll watch it eventually. We're going to recap it eventually, but we're moving so slow. We're kind of taking a break from that. So I'll let you know how that goes in 1 to 2 years.
That's optimistic of you to think you're gonna get there in 1 to 2 years. You're gonna give us an
Isn't it the
update.
very next thing?
Oh, actually, I have no
It's the
idea.
next thing.
Oh,
We're
okay. All right.
I
I
don't know.
actually,
I'm in the second season.
I have no idea where you are, to be honest with you. So,
Maybe I don't know either. I'll look it
um,
up later. Okay, get back to me in 2 to 3 years.
well, okay, and what you technically what you said was I'll let you know in 1 to 2 years. So like you can up in a year you can give us an update
Okay.
on your
Sounds
progress.
good.
Okay, well, I think this is it. A lot of agreement that we don't need another American man. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a strongly held position by the SnarkSquad. We endorse that message, and
Uh,
yeah.
so next week will be our last live stream for WandaVision. However, we would like to keep doing this fun thing with you guys with other TV shows. So we'll have a little bit of a goodbye next week, but only temporarily because we'll be back. This is the only way we get to hang out in 2021. So you'll see us again. Don't worry.
What other Friday night plans do I have right now? Okay. This is it. This is me hanging out and being social on a Friday night. So, I don't know. Like we'll see when I can go outside again if this is still it. But for
Yeah.
now, for as long as I'm unvaccinated and in my house, this is what I'm gonna do.
Uh-huh.
Because okay, here's the thing about Falcon and the Winter Soldier that I discovered is that it's actually only 6 episodes. I just learned this because I was calendaring out our future plans, and I was like, okay, well that's great. It's only going to be 6 episodes, and they were talking about how like it's 6 hours of that, and like that this show is also 6 hours, and like that's also really interesting to me in terms of the way that this stuff is fitting into the larger MCU, because it's sort of taking the place of like a movie. Instead of doing a movie for this character, you're doing this TV show, and so it kind of makes sense to make it a shorter TV show. But also the fact that they chose to make it a shorter TV show means that they can do like the special effects on the CGI stuff on this has been great, has been consistently incredible, and so in addition to the very expensive actors, there's a lot about this that the show is very expensive, and so I think it's two. Probably the financial motive came first, but those two, the financial and the narrative motives both sort of or not even narrative, but like the arc of having this series of movies, those two things serve each other really well, I think, in this way, and I appreciate that we're getting these sort of like condensed seasons. I think it's exciting. Yeah, but that's it. That's all we got. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
All we got.
Well, join us next week. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you're watching this later and there's something cool and important that we didn't talk, there's always more. There's always so much more that we could say. We're just cutting this off now,
Yes.
like for ourselves and for you. But so let us know. Let us know like what stuff we left out, what your big theories are.
Let us know if you cried.
Yeah,
If
tell
you
us
also
about
had
your cries.
sad
Yeah.
person hour.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well,
All right.